everybody, and welcome to the CU podcast, Two Cups of Coffee, episode 4. We have a guest on today. Can you introduce yourself?
Hello. My name's Edward Tagg. Uh, yeah, I'm a creative writing student at Leeds Art University, second year. Woo.
Second year, and how are you finding it?
It's pretty ace, not gonna lie. It's good. With like obviously the first year that started it, so there's no year above us, so we're kind of shaping the course as we're going. For the younger years that we are yet to meet because of certain circumstances in the world.
It's understandable.
Yeah.
So, what do you do in creative writing?
This may come as a shock. You might want to take a seat for this one, but we do writing.
No
No
way!
way, I know, right? No, instead of like a traditional English literature course or English literature with creative writing that other universities do, we solely focus on honing our skills as writers, whilst in loads of different fields from prose, novelization, poetry, script writing, review writing, journalism, if you really want to do that. Um, Other like weird tidbits here and there. We do study a little bit of other people's work, but it's mostly in an effort to better ourselves as writers. Over the course, I've done a series of poems, more than I usually write. I've done quite a lot of what they call short stories. I've also like in off time been working on novelization, which has been imported into my course. I've done a few. I did a two-part review on a genre and music and how they go hand in hand, and just a bunch of other little things sprinkled in between.
Obviously, as the name intends, writing-based course. You mentioned that there's a book, or like you've done writing outside of your course as well.
Yeah, so I've been working on a novel for about 2 to 3 years, called Stand to Resist, and I'm using the course as a way to also better my writing ability for said book.
So they sort of work hand in hand with each other.
Yeah, yeah. On Thursday, I just had to do my first submission of the year. We only had half term to actually do this module, and I submitted part of one of my chapters, which was made in response to dialogue and scene writing. So it kind of works together. I use my book to help my course, and the course helps me improve my book. So it works really well for me.
Well, that sounds amazing. As far as me, when I study in my filmmaking course, I've had to do the same thing as well. Half of the job on my course has been the teacher just gives you a camera and says, go out there and shoot something. And I'm like, okay, guess we're doing it. It's sort of a baptism by fire, what can I say?
We get that a lot as well, where we will just be given free reign to write whatever we want, based around like a genre or a form, and they'll just be like, "Yeah, write whatever you want. Come back to us. We'll all feed back as a group."
This sounds like a lot of good creative freedom. How do you see this affecting your out of uni life? Uni.
I've already kind of come up with a contingency plan. Well, it's not really a contingency plan because it's the one I'm going to do. But when I finished my creative writing degree, I'm going to uh, commit to a course called a TEFL, which is Teach English as a Foreign Language. Like, abroad, I want to go to, there's places in Kenya, Argentina, Brazil, Canada, all across Asia, have like lots of like good jobs where you can just learn, or not us learning, but teach English. And I want to be able to use that as a job, so I'm giving people something actively, and I have a job that's in the fields that I want to do, whilst I am able to write my own books in my spare time. And this creative writing course is kind of that like balance between doing an English degree and doing something that I really, really enjoy doing.
Do you think maybe traveling also will help you when you continue to flesh out your novels?
Completely, because I like to write from. I mean, like obviously I've got like aspects of like kind of old because I write a lot of historical fiction. I've got like a lot of old British culture, but I want to branch out to different nationalities, ethnicities, cultures, just to kind of get better settings rather than I don't want to set every book in like Croydon.
It would be we have for writers and for design and for people writing movies, we have to at some point look into other cultures because that's what we use for references. If I were to make a film, let's say set in Hong Kong, I would have to actually live in Hong Kong to know things, right?
Well, you've cheated there.
Well, exactly. But if I was to say, like for instance, right now I have to prep for my final end of the year film, and I have to write about a family set in an English setting, and half that time I have to figure out, okay, how do English people talk?
Ah, you'll have to hit me up on that one. Master of dialogue here. That no one ever said that about me.
It's such a weird concept, but yeah, you know.
Nailing how people talk is probably one of the hardest parts for, well, not for me, but for like writing in general, because you can tell the best story ever, but if the dialogue is just so hard to like resonate with, then like you won't care about the characters.
It's like if you're playing a video game and the voice actor just decides to have a voice tone so bland, you just like, okay, I don't want to play it anymore.
Well, yeah, like a good example, Hideo Kojima, right? He's a wild card when it comes to stories. He makes some absolutely like crazy stories about like whatever. Like, you know, when you got like Metal Gear Solid and you got now Death Stranding, like plots that are inconceivable, like to me. Like, I don't know how you come up with all of this massive overarching stuff, but sometimes you'll find dialogue in there that is just ridiculous and it takes you out of the story, which is why, like, especially for a film where you're seeing the characters, you don't need to have the visual descriptions written down for someone to understand the scene. They can focus more on what characters are saying. Dialogue is essentially one of the key points to making it work.
Yeah, I could say, I guess it influences things like writing a novel as well, right?
Yeah, so when I first started the novel, it was a world building novel rather than an actual like character driven narrative. And I focused more on developing the world. But then I realized when I first finished that version that I didn't actually like having a book that was so focused on the world it was set in that it kind of had characters no one would care about. So when I rewrote it a second time, I changed the entire story to have the same story beats, but to be from a more character-based like lineup. So there is a lot more focus on dialogue, and I've been practicing a lot on that.
Do you eventually plan to release it?
Yeah. So I technically did release it when I finished the first one. I actually have the original copy by my bedside. I hate it. I'm so close to burning it in a fire. Um, but that's like a normal thing for creators. If you remake a work, the original one becomes like this devil piece to you.
Mhm.
But I released it. I sold 70 copies, each for £11, whereas I only made like £1 to £1.50 per it because Amazon, yada yada yada. Um, then I took it off Amazon. I found an indie publisher who kind of messed me around for about a year and got nothing done. I don't think they really cared about it, so I pulled out from them, and now I'm back on the indie writing scene, rewriting the whole thing again, and then I'm gonna publish it when I'm done back onto Amazon, as this is the final version.
Yeah, I look forward to reading it myself.
Uh, I look forward to being able to read it without having to change words. It's so
Or
tedious.
or die on the inside.
Yeah, or die on the inside like, oh, I wrote that, that sucks, but it like apparently doesn't suck, but I just think it's dreadful.
Yeah, see, that's the thing when people ask me, "Oh, what do you think is if you did a good job on your film?" My simple thing is, if I can sit through that entire film that I make and not cringe, and afterwards I'd be like, "Okay, yeah, I'm okay with rewatching it." Then it's a good film in my book. If I don't die inside, I feel like
Yeah.
that's a very simple. It's a very simple line, you know.
Yeah, like I'm proud of the fact that I've made this story and I've made it almost the way I want it, but it's just like the execution. I'm trying to make it so I deliver the way I want it to without it being tedious for someone to read. And but the problem is you can't figure out how everyone's going to react. I've sent a few copies out to a few people of like chapters, sections. I'm like, can you give me some feedback on this? And most of them come back quite positive, and that makes me like, you know, quite happy. And they help highlight if there's any like weird grammatical errors that are just like hidden in this chunk of text that I missed. Getting that confidence in your own work is probably the hardest part of the entire thing. When it comes to my writing, I've always been very, very like isolated in terms of who I share it with. So my family, apart from my stepdad, my family haven't read my book. The original version, they said the text was too small, which again I can't blame them for it. That was me choosing the text font size. But only my stepdad read it, and so he's helped out a lot when it comes to like it the actual running of it. But like since I've like rewritten it and changed font sizes, I've sent some copies out to my family to read, and they've been quite supportive on that. But apart from outside of the uni, it's just in uni help at the moment.
To be fair, it took a while for my family to jump onto the idea of me saying, "Hey, I want to be a movie maker."
Oh yeah, like it was the same for me because originally I wanted to be a pilot, which my family was very invested in. Yeah, go be a pilot. That'll get you loads of money and you'll be able to fly planes. I was like, wicked. I want to do that. And then disability stuff came around and I couldn't become a pilot. And then after I did that, I was already a musician, so I was like, I'll stick to the music route. And then eventually, when it came to going towards uni, I thought I'm gonna write a book and just see what happens. And then I realized that how much I truly do love writing, and no one else was kind of ready to understand how like much I love writing. So I can relate on that. My parents didn't straight away pick up on it. They were supportive, but they didn't quite think of it of like as like a proper course. My mum always tried to tell me to go do an English language or literature course instead at another uni, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that.
Over the summer, when I came back to Hong Kong, I had a long talk with my parents as well because obviously they're like, "Oh, if you still want to commit to being a filmmaker, you know, they actually asked me, which was miraculous. There's only three things you can do when you grow up. You either have to be you could be anything as long as it's a lawyer, a doctor, or a dentist.
Yeah, I have a friend who gets told that he's got to become a doctor or something, and he's trying to become an electrical engineer.
Well, I mean, more power to him. Electricity and engineering, that is a huge field.
Oh yeah, I kind of wish I did that now.
But yeah, but yeah, like it's over the summer, my parents actually reached out to me. They're like, "Oh, what do you want to do with like business, and how do you see filmmaking?" And it was really funny because at one point they even asked me, "It's like, oh, King, you watch a lot of YouTube videos. Have you ever considered like making some of your own?" And I was like, "Well, that's didn't expect that conversation to go that way." And I think like by the end of the night, they're kind of like, okay, even if you don't aren't a filmmaker, in like the traditional sense, we'll still be willing to support you. And I was like, yes, I've broken my family mold.
No, that's the dream, breaking the family mold. Because most of my family are teachers.
And then look at you going to teach English.
Well, I wanted to do it differently though, because I want to still write my own books.
I mean, yeah, that's very fair. Honestly, looking at now, obviously, COVID. What can we say?
Yeah.
It's just there. It's obviously, I think in the film industry, it's caused a lot of uproar and a lot of people have to take their step back and think, okay, what do we have to do now? Because obviously cinemas are closed everywhere, and now people have to do things such as, or now doing things like live streaming and anything that's non-traditional media. I remember sitting with my course, and even the tutor himself was like, "Oh yeah, we reach a stage now where the film industries are actually sort of scared about like things like YouTube, or streaming because it's so the accessibility and the way to make money is so easily."
Yeah, like streaming services are going to take over. It's kind of sad because I really like cinema way better. Like you can't get the experience of a film in like anywhere else than you can in like a cinema. Like you could have the best surround sound speakers you want, but you're not in a giant like dark room watching a massive film on a massive screen.
Yeah, but definitely, yeah, it's sad. But you know what? The funny thing is, like, I was just talking to my tutor, and then halfway through, when we had the lecture, he just reveals to me out of the blue that he himself gets paid get paid by a company to do cooking streams, and I was like, now that's epic.
Oh wow. That's amazing.
Which, by the way, if my tutor's listening to this, please tell me your profile so I can subscribe to you.
I want to become a tier 3 sub.
Oh man, I wish. Do you see the same thing happening with like books and
Yeah,
just reading?
so in reading at the moment, there's kind of a weird like battle going on behind the scenes between ebooks and regular books, which has been going on for like a decade probably. I don't know. I think that's how long ebooks have kind of been like when Kindle first came out. Um, and it's been like this debate because a Kindle is a lot more cost effective, and technically, in terms of like paper, it can be better for the environment. But obviously, there's people who really like the actual having a book in your hand and having a shelf dedicated to books because it looks nice, it feels nice. Apparently, it smells nice. I've never really smelt books personally, but um, and I'll admit I do prefer having a physical book to a computer copy because you don't really get a sense of like it being real. I guess that's one way to put it.
You know, the old saying where it's like, holding something in your hands is, there's something unique about it compared to looking at it online.
Is that a saying?
Maybe?
Maybe.
I'm
Well, we're
probably
making it.
butchering it.
We're copywriting it, patenting it. That's the king saying right now. Put it down in the.
There's a video I watched somewhere, where some talked about, how VR, and people are like, oh, there's something metaphor or something abstract about, like, no matter what you see electronically or what you do electronically, it's different to say going outside and doing it in the real world.
Yeah, obviously. Like I don't think books will phase out. At least not for another like 200, 300 years or something like that. Because books are just so, like Kindles are going to get way more popular and like ebooks and all of that. They're going to get way more popular. Um, but books are like people rely on books and you can reuse books. That's the best part. Is books get reused over and over and over and over and over again. So I don't think they'll necessarily die out, but I think it'll become more like when you said it'll be harder to become like an actual traditional filmmaker in with the shift in like technology and COVID-19 kind of changing it all. Uh, when it comes to books, I think it's gonna be harder to get people to buy physical books, but it's not gonna be impossible because Amazon still have this support with Kindle Direct Publishing, which is what I use, and they're doing. Thank God for someone who's trying to get rid of books with like ebooks and like being the biggest competitor. At least they're supporting normal book creators.
I mean, you say that, but with how Amazon and how now Google is, possibly going to be broken up because of the antitrust situation, the future might change.
I'm watching it with great interest, but also massive amount of fear.
I mean, definitely. At some point, I feel that even for film, the film industry could very much just go, we're going to find ways to circumvent the pandemic, and now things like YouTube and Twitch and
Disney Plus.
streaming, yes, and streaming services will just become obsolete.
That would be interesting. See, I don't. They probably won't, but like if they manage to make them obsolete, that would be funny. I'm not gonna lie, that'd be really funny.
It would be very interesting.
We'd end up with less disasters like cuties.
Oh yeah.
Streaming services are great if you like for getting new people into showing loads of people your films, but but like when you set the bar that low, you obviously have that level of you're gonna get a lot of bad apples, and it's the same with writing. Indie writing has kind of become like that. You'll get a lot of books that are just like cowboy romance, ghosts and aliens, romance, and then it's just like this like 100-page smut book.
Or the teenage drama.
Yeah, like it's like, I'm just a lonely Texas girl and I'm coming in. Like that's a terrible accent, but but I'm coming into school and now there's two boys and I love them both, but they love me. But which one do I choose? Like yeah, like I don't think there's a problem with writing books like that. I just don't like them. Like it's just like I don't like the
The
genre.
appeal is there.
The appeal's there. They're making way more money than me, so all power to them. They're the ones doing well. They've got their lives sorted. I'm gonna be pretending to be like, oh, I've got these ideas that no one's ever done, and it just turns out it just flops completely because it's actually a terrible idea. I see my work as just an explosion of what's going on in my head. That sounds really pretentious to me. Like, I hate being like the kind of guy who describes his work like this is what my work means to me, but like in reality, like my work is it's my mind, it's my storytelling, it's a lot of the times my dreams because I think of a lot of my stories when I'm dreaming. And I don't know why I remember my dreams so vividly, but there's that. And it's also a way for me to just like not open discussion, but just have a self-contained dialogue between myself and my beliefs and my thoughts and all of that.
I'm willing to bet most artists honestly talk to themselves way too much.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good thing.
I think for me, what drives my work or what drives for me is I usually, well, I mean, it sounds cringy coming from the Christian Union podcast, but literally, like, I've had, I've had being a huge science nerd and huge fantasy nerd, I've always been look at like the world, and I've always been like, okay, plucking things like certain philosophies or certain religions and fusing them into this really weird cocktail of here's a film idea. Where can I go with this?
Yeah, like with the old science fiction, like science operas, and with the whole like expansion of space opera, it's kind of that idea of just someone making a weird idea and then going, okay, let's see where we can go. And now we have Star Wars, like the biggest franchise in the world, probably. Dune coming out again. I'm looking forward to that.
What if we had massive worms in the
What if we had a
desert?
big worm?
And then yeah, all the movies were like, "Oh my goodness, you're a genius."
I like to think it was that simple of just we have a big worm and everyone's like, write that down, write that down.
I wish as well. But yeah, I think obviously ideas, whether or not be from your dreams or from like an outside source, it all feels, in your individual work. And as much as like you said, some work can sound stereotypical, like the teeny soap operas or romance fiction. People still, I feel like at some point, everyone has got their own unique take on art and what they write, whether or not, no matter how many sources they pull from. It's like the whole idea of transformative content.
Yeah, I mean every work is transformative. There's no such thing as an original piece. I don't think. Everything is derived from experience or like sensory data. If we want to use uh, the metaphysics of the mind section.
Psychology, the psychological
That's
diagnosis.
philosophy than it is psychology, but it meshes with it. So sensory data is like the idea that things that it justifies the existence of. I think right. I may butcher this, but I think it's justifying the existence of things around you based upon how you've perceived other things. So if you've seen something before, it doesn't fade out of existence because you're no longer looking at it.
The sun exists even though it's not shining.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like just because the sun's on the other side of the earth doesn't mean like it's not there. So like but all of your writing, your beliefs and stuff, it's brought from like data that you've experienced both growing up and presented to you. Like it like even like the first humans probably like their ideas were based on things that they'd seen in, primitive times. Stuff like that. There's no such I don't think there's anything as like an original idea. Like even ideologies stem from their beliefs and their experiences that they've had from their lives. So I'm less bothered over about making an original idea and more making a compelling story.
Depends what you see, because I feel see what I found that, and obviously I kind of expected is that over what despite when going through 2020 and obviously going through the COVID and the lockdown, we're going to definitely see a different kinds of art and films that obviously reflect that. I remember talking to a film like someone who's already in the industry and talked about what people's moods and what they put in their art. It's responsive to whatever happens in the real world, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's like the the what's going on around you will affect your art, which I think that boils down to why I write my stuff. So I write a lot of my stories based around war. Now that just comes from like a personal like interest in the human condition with conflict because it's this thing we all like hate. We all ruthlessly hate and think it's a bad thing. No one thinks war is necessarily good, but like in a way it's like this thing that always is there. It's in our nature and it's always going to be there and we're never going to get rid of it. Like any sort of conflict. So I kind of like writing based upon how I've seen the world through history and all these conflicts. And and that's where you get a lot of depressing vibes because obviously, fun fact, I suffer from depression. Woohoo! So a lot of my work is quite sad. Um, so the point you made about like with the depression, all their works like really grungy and stuff like that, like that's definitely correct in terms of like experiences around
My family growing from a literally living in almost the equivalent of a cage home in Hong Kong to having actually an apartment and a job. I think that influenced a lot of my work because now my work has always been more not necessarily sunshine and rainbows, because gosh, those make me cringe. But like, but things like along the lines of how would I describe it? Sort of, it's grim, but it's also you also have that small like touch of, oh, maybe things can get better. It's like that scale, you know. If I had like a two like a sliding line like between grim and hopeless to bright and just cheerful.
I don't know what to say on that matter.
I wouldn't say it's like anyone specifically nailed down to a model, but I think when you look at even over like books and various anime and like films and movies that you watch, you can sort of see those parallels. I think, like you said, um, and this might be just my theory, but if you were to see an artist's work over the course of his life, you can see, you know, at this point you're like you can go like, oh, this is where he went through a hard time in his life, or this is where he was felt really upbeat.
Yeah, that's actually uh, hang on, what's his name? The guy who wrote the way the wind blows, Raymond Briggs. If you look over someone told me this at first, and it's really quite interesting. Is how he developed over the course of his year. Like, so he's the guy who wrote The Snowman, for instance, which is a very pretty story and stuff like that. But then when you look at like beats in his life, like his and you've got like really depressing stuff like When the Wind Blows, Time for Lights Out. It's really depressing. I'll get to that one in a second. Um, and then his wife died, and he ended up writing Fungus the Bogeyman, which is this really disgusting creature and book, and he wrote that because he felt so angry in the world. I'm not sure this is 100% true. This is just what someone told me. And then he's now really old, so he's reached a point of his life where he's aware that he's going to die. So he's writing Time for Lights Out, and it's this really depressing book of like collection of contemplation. I think there's some poetry in there, short stories and stuff like. It's just a weird collection of like prose. Um, and Raymond Briggs is just like it's the end of his life, and he's now writing about he's gonna die, and it's like it's like to see him go from such happy stuff to now this like really depressing stuff. Like kind of, that's what I thought about when you said it.
Sort of like how Robert Frost wrote his poetry. You know, his personal life was just written with like his family members dying in sickness, and this might be wrong because I'm obviously not a literature expert on his life, but he still tried to. He took value in like the little things, like you know his famous poem of birches and what was it? The one where it's like a winter in the woods. The poems reflect his needs, like oh everything's so just terrible around him, but he wants to see if there's something of beauty in this world.
I will admit, when it comes to reading, this is like a heinous crime as a writer. I don't actually read that much anymore.
The gasp.
Yeah. Oh my god, shock. Because I don't really. I mean, I have time to read, but I like to use other media to get my storytelling from. I don't know. I have trouble focusing a lot, which might actually, now that I think about it, might actually be reflected in some of my writing, where scenes dart back and forth and stuff like that. I just can't be bothered to read sometimes, but I love writing, so I get my reading from. I then read so I can write. Um, so I may, if anyone in like podcasts ever ask me about references of books, I'm usually not very good at answering those questions.
Someone asked this man right here, right here. Creative writing course, and he doesn't even
It's not
English
creative
books.
reading, is it? So why would I?
I mean, you're not wrong. I think personally for me, the thing is, even though I watch a lot of films, half the time I remember things from films not by what I see, but the way things sound.
Yeah, exactly. Same. I'm massive on sound.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I would be like, if I'm like sitting down, you know, watch at a laptop, and I'm, let's say my flatmate and I are watching a movie, right? I would have to be on my phone and have looking at the and have like paying attention to the movie, and then flatmate would turn around and be like, "King, what the heck are you doing? You're not even looking. You're not even paying attention." I'm like, "Of course I am. Look, they're at that scene, and you know he's about to go visit that person's house." Even though I'm like scrolling on my phone and like glancing up every now and then.
Yeah.
It's a heinous crime. Even times where I'm like, when the lecturer is like, okay, you have to watch this film or you have to watch this movie, I'll just be like, okay, cool. I'll put it up on like a second, on like a desk, on like a separate tab, on the other tab. I'm like halfway gaming or drawing or anything else. That's definitely not watching a movie.
Yeah, I can see that. I usually remember stuff by how it sounds as well. So when it comes to that's why when it comes to reading, I don't necessarily pick it up as well. Uh, and that's why I like stuff like why I think the potential for being the greatest form of story and media collaboration is games and stuff like that, because it's a collaboration of music, sound, visuals, animation, storytelling, writing, voice acting, live action. It's like literally everything film does, but it also has a level of interactivity. So then the audience has like that meant part in it.
I mean, yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, and personally, I mean, I would love to do that as well. I think. But what helps me the most when I like memorize stuff, and honestly, this actually helps me when I'm reading as well, because what I do is when I read, what I tend to do is I read it in my head, but I pretend as if there's like people talking.
Yeah, yeah, like you pretend you're the characters, you can hear the characters' voices, which
Yeah.
time to come full circle back to the idea of dialogue, the specific words you use. Uh, Sometimes when I read it in my head, I read it in their voice, and then sometimes when if I'm definitely on my own, like especially during lockdown, I would say it out loud in the voice of the person, which is the lamest thing ever. Don't ever show anyone any video of you ever doing that. It's so lame, but it helps with creative process.
Yeah, yeah. I think I do that as well. How we receive things, how we process things, how we even judge ourselves.
Yeah, when it comes to writing, because obviously, even though I was raised as a Roman Catholic, I'm not really religious anymore now, and I like to use that kind of philosophy as a little mini guidance of life, which is still, if I told my family that, they'd laugh at me for good reason. Um, but I've kind of I want to like the conversations and the communities I've seen with you guys has helped really shape my writing and my abilities and stuff like that, and that's what the uni has also taught me. It's because the uni has presented like it may be controversial to think, but like some of the ideas that come around the uni, like in terms of like how to present your work and how it should be overly positive, sometimes I don't resonate with. Like I've had people like say, "Oh, your work's it's too boring or depressing." No, not boring, but like depressing because it's like just sad, and they're like, "Oh, it's stop writing about war because like war's bad," and I'm like, "Okay, why?" Because
See, it's funny because on my end, I've had people go up to me and say, your work isn't depressing enough."
yeah, I guess it's different between film and writing.
When I have like at some points, right? I've literally like talked to like if I watch a film at some point, I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't like that film. Didn't really have a point. Left a bad taste in my mouth. And look at you and like they give look at me and like, dude, what's your? I feel like you have the wrong taste. I'm like, it's it just at some point, I have a whole mentality where I'm like, I'm okay with grim and depressing stuff. I feel like it would be wrong, like you said, to just shove that all
Yeah,
away.
yeah, I'm a firm believer of you are allowed to write whatever you want, regardless of how awful it is or how like it could be the worst thing ever, but like I don't want to ban people from being creative, even if I really really disagree with that person. Like just write, create your piece, create your films. There people are going to watch it, people are going to enjoy it. I don't have to enjoy it, but I can watch it and I can potentially learn from your work or learn more about myself in response to your work.
But I think what, like we said about how sometimes the uni, and especially like I said, maybe different courses project different things. I think, yeah, maybe this is from me, from my perspective, but in the film industry, people are like, oh, we don't want any of this happy go sunshine stuff. Perhaps it's a visual thing. When they look at the world, they're like, oh no, it's what we see on screen is nothing like the real world. The real world is all dark and depressing.
With writing, it's usually the other way around because people want to like read like you can't see words as the real word. If you read like depressing words, it just becomes like tedious to some people. But when you read like beautiful language like poetry and oh, I love the trees when they dance on my forehead or whatever. That was terrible, but like people are like, oh, this language is so beautiful and it's so surreal. Like I can imagine a world so beautiful because I'm imagining this world because there's no visual thing in front of me, and that's cool. So like it's weird to see that with film. It's usually if it's too happy, it's not as good. But like if it in writing, if it's too depressing, it can sometimes be not as good.
At the end of the day, what you need is a good balance.
Mm. I mean, I may be like completely talking like out of my backside when it comes to like this is how like people can like because there is no consensus to writing.
No, there isn't. But okay, well, I mean, if you were to look at your work right now, what do you think um, balances out all the doom and gloom from like your your pieces about war?
I don't think there is a balance. I think there is a level of like bounce back. It won't be like a happy story either, because I find it I find it it's not wrong to, but I find it in my when it comes to my writing, I find it
It doesn't like click
it
for
doesn't
you.
click. Like I don't find war as something like there are some really funny and outrageous and absurd stories to do with war, but at the end of the day, people are losing their lives. There's nothing funny about that. Like regardless of who it is losing their life, it's not funny. Obviously, yeah, I like funny war stories. It's not like I'm gonna say like I don't like anything that's light-hearted. Ooh, everything has to be doom and gloom. Um,
We wouldn't have Jojo
we
Rabbit.
wouldn't have Jojo Rabbit. We wouldn't have the original Dad's Army. We wouldn't have Inglorious Bastards. There's a lot of like really depressing stories about really depressing subjects that are funny, is like so funny. But I can't write that, and I don't think I want to write it because I know I can't. I can't get in that mindset.
Oh, you're entering third year, right?
Yes.
What do you think will drive you next when you comes to your work in the future?
Um, I don't know. I really don't know. Uh, I'll write whatever comes to. I'll create whatever comes to mind at the time. Like I can't predict. I spend I spend too much time trying to plan ahead that I'm just gonna. I might write something to do with because obviously I've taken an interest in the philosophy of religion because of you guys, and even though I don't see myself as becoming Catholic again, I still like looking at how religion can be interpreted. Interpreted. That's the word. I made up a word there. Because I've gone through this like this large journey in life where I went from being like extremely like Roman Catholic to being very anti-religious, and then when in just before I came to uni, I ended up kind of I respect religion quite a lot. I think I'd like to do something with that someday. I post a little bit of my work on Instagram under an author, I guess. I've only just started posting some writing bits there, very minimal. I don't really. I mean, I'm in university. I'm setting up the Leeds Art Uni Collaboration Society, which has been accepted to open up collaboration between students more than we already do, or to try and make it better. And you can find we'll be running a concept art book project, which has been going on for several months, based on my novel, which is being visualized by about 20 other artists, and that will be hopefully done by next year.
Sounds very interesting as well. Thanks so much for coming, Ed.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in to the podcast, and we'll see you guys hopefully next time. Take care, guys.
Bye.